Don't worry. Nothing happened to her this time, but that doesn't mean she'll be able to escape the next time. The middle-aged man on the opposite side comforted Susan. Susan said viciously, "Brother, you must let her die next time." "Don't worry. I will definitely handle this for you." Cheryl was more frightened after this car accident and had nightmares for several days. Gus did not go to the office. He stayed at home with her every day. Although documents could be sent by Benny to handle, Gus canceled all his meetings. If he could cancel it, he would. If he could not cancel the meeting, he would hold a video conference. On this day, when Gus refused to go to the company, Cheryl heard him. It was dinner time. The maids were preparing dinner and came out to call Cheryl and Gus to eat. "Mr. Monahan, Miss Cheryl, dinner time." The maid did not say anything and found that Gus was not in the living room. "Hey, where is Gus?" "He went to the study to take a call. You go and do your work. I will go and call him," Cheryl said. "Okay, Miss Cheryl." The maid nodded and turned to enter the kitchen. Cheryl stood up from the sofa and went to the study to call Gus for dinner. The door to the study was not closed. Cheryl came to the door of the study and was about to call him for dinner as usual. However, before she could open her mouth, she heard Gus's usual cold tone coming from the study. "Why are you looking for me? I already told Benny to treat... He is your father? Benny will handle... I am not free tomorrow. When I am free, I will treat your father to a meal." "Fine." Gus cut off the call. However, just as he hung up, his phone rang again. He looked at the caller ID on his phone and put it back to his ear. "Tomorrow." "No, I don't have time. I've already told Mark. I don't have time to see his father tomorrow. That's it." Gus cut off the phone after finishing his last sentence. The study finally stopped. Cheryl stood at the door of the study for a long time. She raised her hand and knocked on the door. "Come in." Gus's voice came. Cheryl pushed the door open and walked in. Gus was not in front of the desk, but in front of the floor-to-ceiling window. He was looking out the window, thinking about something. Cheryl's footsteps paused for a moment. She walked over and said, "Dinner is ready." Gus heard her words and turned around. He looked at her and then nodded. "Okay." When the two of them were about to leave, Gus's phone rang again. Cheryl looked at the phone on Gus's desk and looked over. She saw that the caller ID was Jensen Doyle, her uncle's phone. Cheryl's line of sight paused. Gus picked up the phone and looked at the caller ID. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he said to Cheryl, "You eat first. I'll take this." Cheryl nodded and walked away. When she walked to the door of the study room, she heard Gus pick up the phone. "Hello, Uncle. I have something to do tomorrow. I can't get out of here. I can't see the department head." Cheryl quietly stood at the door of the study and listened to Gus's call. Then she quickly left. Cheryl had mixed feelings about this dinner. These few days, he was at home every day. She more or less understood why. Because of her car accident, she always had nightmares. As the head of the Dragon's Gate, he carried the entire organization on his shoulders. Right now, L Corporation had just settled down in Washington, D.C. If they could get the support of Mr. Vincent, they would develop even faster. This was also why Mark and even her uncle called Gus. But he refused. How could Cheryl bear to let Gus give up this opportunity because of her? Even if she knew that even if Gus missed this opportunity, he would still be able to stand at the peak of the Capitol. But she still hoped that he would not miss it. Therefore, when Cheryl finished dinner and watched television with Gus, she started. "Gus." "Huh?" Gus turned around and looked at her. Cheryl pursed her lips and said, "You can go to the office tomorrow." Gus was slightly stunned when he heard her words. Then he replied, "No." "I'm fine. You don't have to stay at home with me all the time. Really." Cheryl paused for a moment and then said with a bright smile, I'm planning to go out tomorrow, too. You don't even know that I've been staying at home for the past few days." Gus tilted his head and looked at Cheryl. He did not even blink his eyes. The bright light in the living room shone on his face. It outlined a golden halo and looked very handsome. Cheryl's lips curled up slightly. "Or do you plan to stay at home alone? Then I will not care about you." "I know." Gus slowly spat out those words. Cheryl's heart was sour and sweet when she heard his words, but her hanging heart relaxed. The next day, Cheryl was woken up by the alarm. She told Gus yesterday that she was going out today. She had to pack up early and go out. When Cheryl woke up, Gus also woke up. He stared at her back for a few seconds and then got up. Gus had just put down his knife and fork when Cheryl, who was still eating breakfast, said, "It's getting late. Quickly, go to the office. Later, I want your lips, too." Gus stared at her and then left the dining room with a quick, "Fine." He went to his room and walked out of the house. Cheryl heard the sound of a car starting up outside and let out a sigh of relief. Finishing her breakfast, she went back to her room and found her own bag. She told the maid and went to the entrance to change her shoes. After changing her shoes, she opened the door and walked out. She hadn't gone out for a few days. Cheryl suddenly went out of the warm house. She shivered violently from the cold. She shrunk her neck and lowered her head as she walked out. Just as she walked out of the yard, she realized that something was not right. Why was Gus's car on the roadside outside the yard? Didn't he leave more than 10 minutes ago? Could it be that Benny came to pick him up? Just as this thought flashed through Cheryl's mind, the passenger door opened. Gus was sitting in the driver's seat with his head tilted to look at her. Cheryl touched her nose, then she walked over. "Why haven't you left yet?" Before she could finish, she was interrupted by Gus. "Come with me." "Huh?" He was planning to drive her around? Cheryl blinked her eyes and climbed into the passenger seat. She closed the car door and was about to put on her seatbelt when Gus leaned over and helped her put on her seatbelt. "Well, you can take me to the roadside in the city." Gus did not say anything. He stepped on the gas and drove away from the house. The roads in Washington, D.C. were the most congested at 8 in the morning. They were congested the whole, and it was not easy for them to reach the city. Cheryl thought that Gus would put her on the roadside. After all, she had already told him about where to drop her off. She did not expect Gus to drive her all the way to the L Corporation. "Get out of the car," Gus said, as he turned off the engine. Cheryl pushed open the door and got out. Just as she was about to say, "I'm going for a walk," Gus reached out and grabbed her hand. Then he walked into the company. The last time Cheryl came to the company, her relationship with Gus was not as close as it was now. They just walked side by side and received a lot of attention. This time, Gus held Cheryl's hand and received even more attention. The receptionist on the first floor opened her mouth and did not react for a long time. As if he did not see everyone's reaction, Gus directly brought Cheryl into the room and nodded. They took the elevator all the way to the floor of the office of the president. A secretary in Gus's office saw Gus come in and was about to greet him. "Mr. Monahan," she said. When the secretary saw Cheryl holding Gus's hand, she was stunned. After all, the last time she saw Cheryl and Gus getting along, she guessed that Cheryl and Gus were friends. But now, it was obvious they were close. As Gus led Cheryl to the office, he asked, "Where is Benny?" "Mr. Ross took his men to the reception room to make arrangements." The secretary quickly looked away and answered, "Go and call him over." Gus suddenly remembered something and said, "Make her a cup of tea and let him bring it in." "Yes, Mr. Monahan," she said. Gus brought Cheryl into the office, closed the door and let go of her hand. He took off his coat and asked, If you want to head out, ask the secretary to accompany you later." No thanks. Cheryl originally said that she wanted to go out because she wanted Gus to go to the office. Why would she ask Gus to arrange a secretary to accompany her? Then let her find some books or magazines for you to read. "Don't bother. I'll be fine," Cheryl said. "Okay." Then he went to the desk and started to read the documents. Previously, Benny had sent a lot of documents to the house for him to sign. However, the documents he signed were all urgent. The less urgent documents were piled up on the desk, filling the entire desk. When Cheryl glanced at Gus behind the desk and the piles of documents on the desk, her heart was filled with bitterness. He clearly had so many things to do, but he still spent time with her at home. Soon there was a knock on the door. "Come in." Gus did not even look up. Benny entered. When he saw Cheryl, an expression of understanding flashed across his face. He called Gus and walked toward Cheryl with the tea in his hand. "Miss Cheryl, your tea." "Thank you, Benny." Cheryl took the tea from Benny's hands. "You are welcome, Miss Cheryl." Benny shook his head and walked to Gus's desk to report to him about Gus's schedule. Gus did not come to the company for a few days, and business needed to be handled urgently. Gus listened as he flipped through the documents. After Benny finished his report, he asked, "When will Mr. Vincent come by the company?" 9:30, Benny replied. Gus stopped flipping through the documents and looked up at the clock on the wall. It was already 10 minutes to 9. He closed the documents in his hand and said to Cheryl, "Are you going with me to see the director?" "He came here for official business, so I won't go." Cheryl shook her head. Gus did not force her. He just said, "Okay, you stay in the office. Think about what you want to eat for lunch." "Okay," Cheryl nodded. Gus flipped through a few more documents. At 9:20 a.m., Benny came in from outside. "Gus, Mark, and Mr. Vincent are here?" "Okay." Gus put down the documents and said to Cheryl, "I will go first." "Go, quickly," Cheryl said. Gus walked out of the office and gave the secretary a few words before leaving with Benny. Mr. Vincent and Mark were not the only ones who arrived. Mark saw Gus and greeted him warmly. "Gus, you're in the office." "I'm done with my work, so I came over." After Gus answered, he turned his gaze to the person next to Mark. Mark smiled and said to Gus, "Gus, let me introduce you. This is my father." "Hello." Gus reached out his hand. Mark's father knew who Gus was, so he shook his hand. "Gus Monahan." "Don't be so polite. Just call me by my name." Gus did not like Zachary, Susan, and Jenna, but that was because they did not treat Cheryl well. Those who were good to Cheryl all had good expressions and were easy to talk to for him. One look at Mark, and you knew that to be true. In the beginning, Gus was still messing with him because of Emma's affairs. Later, he found out that he had a good relationship with Cheryl, and his attitude toward Mark improved. Mr. Vincent was not a pretentious person. He nodded. "Then I will go with your uncle and call you Gus." "All right," Gus nodded. After exchanging more pleasantries, they started to talk about proper business. Mr. Vincent came to check on the situation on behalf of the higher-ups. Elle had settled down in Washington, D.C., and it had only been a few months. Yet it was already so strong. The higher-ups needed to investigate the situation properly. Of course, Mr. Vincent came purely to take the stage. After all, he knew Gus's identity. After that, his son's company was still working with Gus. After an hour, the conversation ended with a call from Mr. Vincent. After sending Mr. Vincent out of the office, Gus was about to return to his office. Benny, who was on the phone, put down his phone and hurried over. "Gus, the investigation of Ms. Cheryl's car accident has come to a conclusion." Gus immediately stopped and said, "Speak." "According to our investigation, the driver of the accident was diagnosed with lung cancer. His family spent all their money to treat him. That day, he suddenly left the hospital. He rented the car and parked it at the intersection for an hour. Then he attacked the taxi Miss Cheryl was in. It was intentional. After he died, $200,000 appeared in his account. Unfortunately, that money was wired through a black account. Unable to find any information, he could confirm that the car accident wasn't an accident, Benny said. Gus was not happy when he confirmed it was intentional, because it meant that someone was targeting Cheryl. Moreover, the plan was perfect and did not leave any clues. Arrange for people to investigate the person that person has been in contact with recently and see if they can find any clues, Gus said. Yes, sir. Benny opened his mouth and was about to say something when Mark arrived. Sir, I was wondering if I have the honor to treat you to a meal. Gus nodded and said, I will go and call Cheryl. Wait here. Mark immediately asked, Is Cheryl here too? In my office, Gus replied. I thought I would have to meet her at the Doyle family gathering the day after tomorrow. It just so happens that she's here too. Let's all have dinner together, Mark said. Gus looked at Mark. The Doyle family's gathering the day after tomorrow? It's the Winters get-together. Cheryl didn't tell you, Mark asked curiously. She probably forgot. Cheryl had been in a bad mood these few days because of the accident. How could she still remember the winter solstice party? Mark replied, Oh. Then he said, We always eat turkey during our solstice party. We always go back to the old family home. I don't know about this. Although Gus knew Cheryl had her own family traditions, he really didn't know anything about them. Gus approached Cheryl. I'm done with work. Have you thought about where to eat? Gus asked. Yes, let's go get barbecue. I want to eat brisket, Cheryl said. Then let's go. Before Gus could answer, Mark interrupted. Cheryl heard the voice and turned her head. She was surprised to see Mark. Cousin Mark, when did you get here? I arrived with Gus. It's just that Cheryl's cousin can only ever see Gus. How can she notice me? Mark teased. Cheryl blushed and felt very embarrassed. Are you teasing me? Yes, I'm only joking, Mark replied, but the smile on his face did not diminish. Cheryl really did not have that kind of sass. She continued to chat with him. She directly changed the topic. I heard that Uncle Zach came as well. Why didn't you bring him? He's busy in his office. Let's go. Mark did divert his attention. Oh, Cheryl nodded and said to Gus, Cousin Mark, you don't want to go eat barbecue? Yes. Gus did not object to Cheryl's words. Instead, Mark said, Don't worry about me. Let's go. The dishes there are good. Although Gus's attitude towards him improved a lot during this time, Mark did not think that he could be presumptuous in front of him. Gus had already planned to accompany Cheryl to eat brisket. How could he dare to change the place? Just now, Mark had heard Gus say that Cheryl liked to eat there. Cheryl had finished 2 servings of brisket while he watched. Gus took out a tissue and wiped Cheryl's mouth as he asked, Do you want more? Order as much as you'd like. That's enough. I'll come again next time, Cheryl said. Mark had seen Gus and Cheryl together before. However, at that time, it was not a fight between Gus and Cheryl. In all kinds of situations, they weren't that close. Today was Mark's first time seeing Gus and Cheryl so close. It was completely different from the usual cold. The gentle feeling made him feel like he had seen him incorrectly. When Gus was gentle, he would feel the same way. After lunch, they all left together. I'm going to the parking lot to get the car. Wait for me here, Gus said. Gus, you can go and I'll have a chat with Cheryl, Mark said with a smile. Gus looked at him and walked quickly to the parking lot. Mark, who was coldly looked at, felt puzzled. He didn't do anything just now, did he? In Gus's eyes, as long as Cheryl smiled at any man other than him, then he would be dissatisfied. In other words, he was too possessive and too jealous. Of course, Gus did not know that he was jealous. He did not even think about his feelings for Cheryl. He just thought that Cheryl was his woman and it was only natural. She could only smile at him. "Cheryl, I heard from Gus that something happened to you before." "Oh, I got into a bad car accident. He was worried about me and stayed at home with me for a few days." Pausing for a moment, Cheryl said, "I am very sorry about this. I will apologize to Uncle one day." Mark smiled and shook his head. "It's just a small matter. My dad won't mind. But you were shocked by the accident. Are you all right now?" "I'm fine," Cheryl shook her head. Cheryl and Mark chatted and did not know that there was a person watching them. That person wore a mask, a hat, and a black windbreaker. He was holding a flower pot in his hand. His target was Cheryl's head. Cheryl and Mark were talking and did not notice him in the slightest. Gus drove over from the parking lot. When he saw Cheryl and Mark talking, he was going to honk his horn and interrupt them. In the end, he glanced at them. He just happened to see it. There was a person on the second floor. The flower pot in his hand dropped toward Cheryl's head. Without even thinking, he immediately shouted Cheryl's name, "Get out of the way!" Then he rushed over there. Cheryl heard Gus's voice and looked at him in confusion. Mark reacted faster. He quickly pulled Cheryl and ran. The moment they ran away, there was a thud behind them. The two of them turned around and saw a smashed flower pot. It was where Cheryl was standing just now. Cheryl was scared and her body trembled violently. Gus just happened to run over and draw her into his arms. "Don't be afraid. I'm here. It's fine." Mark had seen many things in the world, so when he saw the shattered flower pot on the ground, he didn't feel scared. If it weren't for Gus's warning, he wouldn't have reacted quickly enough. The flower pot would have smashed onto Cheryl's head. When he came back to his senses, he immediately rushed to the person who heard the noise and ran out of the restaurant. "What's going on with you guys? A flower pot fell down from upstairs and almost killed someone." The manager kept apologizing to Mark. "Sorry, it's our bad. We are willing to compensate you for your loss." "There's no need for that. It is best for your restaurant to get rid of this hidden danger." Gus asked, "What would money serve? Do we look like money is the issue here?" Sorry." The manager kept apologizing. After Cheryl calmed down, he sent Cheryl to the car. After closing the door, he said to Mark, "The flower pot did not fall off by itself. Someone dropped it." Mark was first stunned. Then he said, "You mean someone had smashed the pot down on purpose?" "Yes," Gus nodded and said, "When I'm gone, help me get the surveillance camera of the restaurant. Then I'll ask Benny to look into it for you." Of course, Mark would not reject such a small matter. Although with his status, doing this kind of thing was making a big fuss over nothing. But Gus's identity was even more unsuitable. Furthermore, it was obvious that he did not want Cheryl to know about this matter. Therefore, Mark agreed. Gus thanked him, then walked around the car and got into the car. "What did you say to Cousin Mark just now?" Cheryl sat in the car and saw Gus and Mark talking, but she did not hear them. "He told me about the winter solstice party." Gus lied without blushing. Cheryl only remembered about the winter party after Gus mentioned it. "Is it the winter solstice already?" During this period of time, she had forgotten about all kinds of things. 2 days from now," Gus said. Cheryl let out a cry and then asked, "Do you have time to go?" "Yes," Gus nodded. "If you don't have time, I'll give Grandfather a call. You don't have to." Cheryl did not forget the pile of documents on Gus's desk. "I have time," Gus said. On the day of the winter solstice, Gus and Cheryl had already packed up and returned to the Doyle family's main residence. The Doyle family's main residence was in a historic district of the capital. It was an area of powerful families and historic homes they'd held for generations. The status of the Doyle family in the capital was understandable. The old master had also lived there all those years ago. However, after he recovered from his illness, left the city to recuperate. However, the great festival of the winter solstice still needed to be held in the old residence. When Cheryl and Gus went over, basically everyone from the Doyle family had already arrived. Back then, when Cheryl and Gus returned home for the banquet, the old tutor had specially introduced Gus to everyone. Therefore, everyone knew him. It was just that they only knew each other. For example, those juniors of the Doyle family, because of Cheryl, all had a cold and indifferent attitude towards Gus. Unexpectedly, Mark saw Cheryl and Gus arrive. He immediately got up and said, "Gus, Cheryl, you made it. Come over and make yourself at home." Mark and Cheryl used to have a good relationship. That was because Mr. Doyle and his mother liked Cheryl. At this time, everyone was shocked when they saw how close he was to Cheryl and Gus. Gus coldly nodded and sat down. Cheryl smiled and said to Mark, "Thank you, Cousin Mark." Everyone saw that Gus was so indifferent to Mark and was very dissatisfied. Who does he think he is? Cousin Mark greeted him so warmly, and all he has is an indifferent expression? He's just a man with an illegitimate daughter. Who does he think he is? A voice from afar said. Mark and Gus both heard the statement. Mark's expression was ugly. "What nonsense are you talking about? Why would you say that?" Mark said, berating his two younger cousins. But they were at a loss for words. They didn't understand why Mark would be angry when they were right. "What's wrong with Mark?" At this moment, a tall and sturdy young man walked in from outside. He had a cold and dark aura about him, and Mark's eyes immediately lit up when he saw him. "Jordan, you're back. I didn't know that. Why hadn't I heard?" he asked. "I decided to come back at the last minute. I didn't call my dad," Jordan Doyle said. His eyes fell on Gus, who was sitting on the sofa. "Who is this?" Gus asked. "Let me introduce you," Mark said. "Jordan, this is Gus, Cheryl's husband. Gus, this is Jordan, my cousin." Gus looked up at Jordan and offered his hand to shake hands with him. But Jordan didn't make a move. Instead, he looked angry. Mark stepped in between the two of them. Jordan's attitude made Gus raise his eyebrows slightly, but Jordan didn't respond. Jordan scoffed at Mark trying to stand in between them. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Are you afraid I'm going to get mad at him?" Mark rolled his eyes. "No, I'm worried about him getting angry with you," he said. "Who is this powerful man, then?" Jordan questioned. "Someone as powerful as Aiden," Mark warned. Jordan nodded. Jordan and Mark were descendants of Robert Doyle, so they were born with their own power. They were not at the same level of Aiden, who led some of the biggest companies in the world and was the son-in-law of the leader of Dragon Gate. Jordan was not a fool. When he heard Mark mention Aiden, he understood how powerful Gus must be. He then greeted Gus politely. The younger cousins were shocked to see Jordan be so polite and respectful to Gus. A few moments later, Mr. Bridge came over. "Mr. Gus, Mr. Robert heard that you were here, and he has requested that you meet with him." So Robert didn't choose to see his grandsons, but the husband of his illegitimate granddaughter? The family was in awe. Gus nodded. Then he said to Cheryl, "Come with me." "No, Grandpa wants to see you. Something must be up." "Go quickly. I will wait for you here," Cheryl said. "Stay here. Don't go anywhere," Gus said. Cheryl burst into laughter when she heard him. "I know. You can go," she replied. Gus thought about it. This was the Doyle family, so Cheryl should be fine. So he left with Mr. Bridge. After Gus left, Jordan relaxed. He let out a breath and said to Mark, "Let's go out for a while. I have something to ask you." Mark knew what Jordan wanted to ask. He nodded and stood up. Then he left the hall with Jordan. After they left, Cheryl was left alone. She didn't want to speak with anyone around her. She took out her phone from her bag and scrolled through it while waiting for Gus. A few minutes later, Sue came over. When she saw Cheryl, her face immediately turned ferocious. "You idiot! Why are you here?" Cheryl knew that Sue did not like her, but usually Sue ignored her. This type of confrontation was unusual. She was surprised that Sue would be so crude at a Doyle family gathering. Cheryl didn't want to cause a scene, so she responded politely. "Hello, Miss Sue. You caused Jenna to be in such a state, and you're still here, acting all innocent? Do you think I will fall for your trick?" Sue said. "What are you talking about? What about Jenna?" Cheryl said, confused. "Lying piece of—" Sue raised her palm and slapped Cheryl's face. Before Cheryl could react, she was about to slap her again when Mark's voice came from behind her. "What are you doing?" he said. Mark and Jordan walked over and blocked Sue from hitting Cheryl. "Get out of the way," Sue said. Her face was full of hatred. Mark and Jordan did not move. "Today is the winter solstice. This isn't the time for this," Mark said. Sue reluctantly pulled her hand back. "I'll get revenge on you. Later," she told Cheryl, and then she walked away. "Are you okay?" Mark asked Cheryl. Cheryl shook her head and did not say anything. "What happened with Sue?" Jordan asked. He knew that Cheryl did not have a good relationship with her father, but he also knew that Robert's relationship with Cheryl had caused it to improve. But why did Sue still hate Cheryl so much? And why did she respond like that? "I don't know. Sue said that I harmed Jenna?" Cheryl stared blankly. "Jenna? I haven't seen Jenna today," Jordan said, looking around. Mark knew the truth about where Jenna was, but Gus told him that Cheryl did not know and did not mention it to her. So Mark quickly changed the subject. "Don't think about Jenna. Did she actually hit you? If she left a mark, then Gus will be upset," Mark said. Mark had seen how much Gus cared for Cheryl with his own eyes. "It just stings. Nothing much," Cheryl said. Mark looked at Cheryl's face and nodded. 10 minutes later, Gus returned. As soon as he came over, he saw the mark on Cheryl's face. He immediately asked, "What's wrong with your face?" "What?" Cheryl asked. She looked confused. "The mark on your face," Gus said. Cheryl's eyes flashed and she replied, "Oh, I accidentally scratched myself in the bathroom this morning." Gus did not believe Cheryl at all. He knew there were no marks on her face before he went to talk with Robert. Why would Cheryl lie about this? Gus's eyes darkened slightly and then he nodded. Seeing that Gus believed her, Cheryl let out a sigh of relief. After dinner, Gus and Cheryl prepared to go back, but Robert asked them to stay for a bit longer. Cheryl and Robert sat in the living room and talked, and Gus went to find Mark. He wanted to find out what had happened to Cheryl during the day when he had chatted with Robert. "It was Sue. She's mad at Cheryl because of Jenna," Mark explained. "Sue?" A cold light flashed in Gus's eyes, but he didn't say anything. Mark took Gus's silence as a sign that he was not angry, and he thought that he did not mind. He let out a sigh of relief. But he did not know that Gus was a very protective person. He had injured Nate Johansson and his family just for a tiny mark left on Cheryl's neck. He was already annoyed about Jenna, and he had asked Robert to send her away. But he didn't expect Sue to blame Cheryl. Sue was now certainly on Gus's list of people to watch out for. On the drive back home, Gus asked Cheryl if she had any more ointment left. She didn't know how to respond. When she was silent, he changed directions and drove them to a pharmacy. He parked in the lot and got out of the car. Cheryl sat in the car and watched him enter the pharmacy. Did he just say ointment? Was he going to buy it? But they had driven nearly 30 minutes out of the way, past multiple pharmacies where they could have purchased other ointment. Why did Gus need to go to this pharmacy? A few moments later, Gus came out of the pharmacy. He put a bag in Cheryl's lap and started the car. In the bag was the familiar ointment. Cheryl was stunned. How did Gus know about this medicine? It was the same one that Paul had given her. and the same bottle that Gus had thrown. Before, Cheryl thought the maid had bought her a new bottle, but now she realized that Gus had gone out of his way to find a pharmacy that sold it, to buy her a new bottle. She turned to look at Gus. His hands were on the steering wheel. His handsome face was expressionless. He looked very unfriendly. As if sensing her gaze, Gus turned his gaze to her. Seeing Cheryl looking at him, he suddenly remembered that Cheryl's injury was on her face. He immediately parked the car by the road. "What's wrong?" Cheryl asked curiously. Gus did not answer her. He only said, "Give me the ointment, and I will apply it for you." Cheryl then understood that Gus had stopped the car to apply the ointment on her. She stared blankly at Gus's serious face. Her heart beat rapidly. He really liked her, right? Benny did not find too many clues about Cheryl's car accident. After all, the owner of the car was already dead. The account was an illegal account, and the clues on both sides were cut off. He could only confirm that the car accident wasn't an accident. However, he had gained a lot from the incident with the flower pot. The surveillance camera captured the person who threw the plot. They had a mask, a hat, and a windbreaker in the video outside. But they could find other videos that showed the person inside without a mask. But there were so many people in the Capitol. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack to find out who they were. At the very least, Gus already understood that what had happened to Cheryl was not an accident. Someone was deliberately targeting her. He could not find out who was targeting her, but he could arrange for precautions. Gus believed that Cheryl was safest with him, but Cheryl did not want to follow him to the company every day. In the end, Gus asked Benny to secretly arrange a few people by Cheryl's side to protect her. However, Cheryl still got into trouble. She had called Paul earlier to help her pack up the things at the hospital. They'd arranged to meet at a coffee house. After she left the house to go to the coffee house, a person walking along the sidewalk near the home made a phone call. Cheryl has already left. Arrange for a taxi to pick her up. Cheryl walked down the block to where she usually caught a taxi. She saw a driver coming over, but then a woman rushed out in front of her and hailed the taxi. Cheryl put down her hand and prepared to wait for the next car. But to Cheryl's surprise, the car drove past the other woman and came back to a stop in front of Cheryl. The driver rolled down the window. "Do you want a taxi?" the driver asked. The other woman was upset and cursing at both Cheryl and the driver. Cheryl was confused. She didn't even call for a taxi. Why didn't the driver take the other woman? She did not know that this taxi was hired by Gus. He had wanted to arrange a chauffeur for her, but he knew she would refuse, so he arranged a taxi for her. Cheryl got into the car and gave directions to the coffee house. Not long after the taxi started, a black Audi drove out from another intersection and caught up with the taxi. When Cheryl arrived at the coffee house, Paul was already there. He waved at her when she entered. He was already seated. She joined him at his table and they called over the waiter to order. Paul picked up a paper bag from the seat beside him and handed it to Cheryl. "Take a look at your things and see if I missed anything," he said. "You got everything. What could you possibly have missed?" Cheryl asked Paul. She took the paper bag and put it on the seat beside her, without looking at it much. Paul shook his head and said, "Do you trust me that much?" "I do trust you. Who do you trust?" Cheryl asked. Paul was speechless. Cheryl giggled. "By the way, the advanced studies list will come out in 2 days. Get ready," Paul said. Cheryl was stunned for a moment. Then she said, "I don't work in the hospital anymore. Wouldn't my place be gone?" "Technically, yes," Paul said, "but I've already talked to the hospital director to try to make it work, so hopefully there won't be any issues." He paused for a moment and said, "If there is a problem, we can figure out a way around it." Cheryl shook her head and said, "If there is a problem, then forget it. That would be too troublesome." Paul nodded. But he had already decided that if Cheryl didn't have a spot, they would figure it out. Paul and Cheryl continued chatting until they were ready to leave. Just as Cheryl was about to get up, she heard a voice behind her. "Cheryl!" Cheryl turned around and saw Billy. Billy had come to grab coffee, but she didn't expect to see Cheryl, and she didn't expect to see her joking with another man. She felt protective of Gus. Billy said to Cheryl, "Do you want to stop by Club Crimson for a bit?" Cheryl shook her head and refused. "Gus will be heading back for lunch, so I will be back there soon." Billy smiled when she heard that Cheryl would be joining Gus for lunch. "Okay," she said. "Well, then I won't keep you." Cheryl said goodbye to Billy and Paul and left the cafe first. Billy remained, and she turned to look at Paul. She crossed her arms and said, "Cheryl and Gus are doing well. You have no chance." Paul paused for a moment and then said, "Is there anything else you want to say? If not, I will go." Paul turned around and left. Cheryl had no idea about what Billy had said to Paul. She went to the roadside to hail a taxi, and right as she raised her hand, a car immediately drove over. She sat in the back and realized she had the same driver as that morning. "What a coincidence," the driver said. Cheryl smiled and said, "I will return to where I came from." The taxi driver nodded and started the car. Not long after the car drove out, a black Audi followed the taxi. The taxi driver quickly noticed the Audi and took out his phone. When he was at a stoplight, he sent a text, "Black Audi following." The other person quickly replied, "Understood. You don't need to worry about it. You just need to get Cheryl home." The driver took a look at the message and put the phone back in his pocket. After about 5 minutes, 2 black Audis were now following the car, as well as a Mercedes-Benz. The taxi driver began to drive faster. Gus had already been alerted that there were cars tailing Cheryl. At the office, Gus was getting impatient. They knew the car accident wasn't accidental, and they knew that someone out there was threatening Cheryl. Benny saw Gus's anger. "Why don't you call back Todd to protect Cheryl?" he asked. Gus thought for a few seconds. Todd was the only person whose strength was likely close to Gus's. "Call Todd and ask him to come back as soon as possible," he said. "Yes, sir," Benny said. He let out a sigh of relief. Cheryl did not know that Gus was worried about her and was planning to get Todd back. When she returned to the house, the maid was preparing lunch. Cheryl offered to help, and the two of them finished preparing. When Gus returned to the house, he saw Cheryl busy in the kitchen. His originally uneasy heart immediately calmed down when he saw this scene. He put down the briefcase in his hand and walked into the kitchen. When the maid saw him come in, she opened her mouth and prepared to call him. But Gus stopped her, and she left the kitchen. Cheryl, who was cooking, did not know that the maid behind her was gone. She said, "Help me get a plate." Gus heard her and turned around. He took out a plate from the cabinet behind him and handed it to her. Cheryl did not even turn her head. She took the plate and put the food into the plate. Suddenly, she realized that something was not right. Just now, the hand that passed the plate to her was not of the maid's, but a much more familiar hand. Cheryl paused for a few seconds and then turned her head. She saw Gus standing behind her. His usually cold and expressionless face had traces of gentleness. She was stunned. "What's wrong?" Gus asked when he saw her staring at him. She just asked, "When did you come back?" "I just got here," Gus asked. "What are you cooking?" "Chicken." Cheryl turned around and continued to cook. "Hurry up and go out and sit. The kitchen is dirty." Gus did not move. He reached behind Cheryl and wrapped his arms around her waist. Cheryl paused for a moment and then turned her head to ask, "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Gus said, leaning into her. Cheryl nodded and let him lean against her. She continued to cook. Gus made up his mind that he must protect Cheryl and find whoever was threatening her as soon as possible. Emma and Wendy had been receiving treatment with a doctor in Germany, and the doctor was now coming to DC for a lecture. Emma decided to bring Wendy to the lecture and to continue treatment. She called Cheryl to let her know she was in town and to ask her to dinner. Cheryl agreed and then called Gus. After the car chase incident, Gus was worried that Cheryl would get into trouble again in a taxi. He arranged for Benny to go to the house to pick her up, and then he would go with her. He thought that arranging a car for her might raise suspicions. Benny came to the house, picked Cheryl up, and then went straight to the Landis Corporation. When they arrived at Landis Corporation, Cheryl received a call from Gus. He was going to be coming down in 5 minutes. Cheryl decided to stay downstairs. She didn't think it was worth going up with Benny if Gus would be coming soon. But Benny did not want to leave her alone. "I'll wait here," he said, and stood beside Cheryl. "Benny, go and do what you need to do. I will wait by myself," Cheryl said. Benny was a little hesitant. "Just 5 minutes. I can stay here alone," Cheryl said. Benny knew that if he insisted, it would arouse Cheryl's suspicions. But this was the company property, so he figured she should be okay. He said to Cheryl, "Okay, I'll go. Gus should be here soon." Cheryl sat down on the bench in the lobby. Not long after she sat down, a security guard came in from outside. "Miss?" Cheryl looked up and looked at him. "Is something the matter?" "Are you Cheryl?" the security guard asked. "Yes, it's me. Is anything the matter?" Cheryl asked. "There is someone outside who asked me to come in to look for you," the security guard said. He pointed outside. Who would look for her? This seemed strange, but Cheryl didn't want to be rude. She nodded and got up from the chair and went out with the security guard. Gus came out of the elevator and saw Cheryl and the security guard walk out of the company. He wanted to call out to her, but instead he quickly followed behind. Cheryl followed the security guard out of the company and then came to the flower bed at the entrance of the company. "Where are they?" Cheryl asked. "I don't know. They were here just now." The security guard answered as he pulled a dagger from his right sleeve. He flipped his hand and held the dagger tightly. He stabbed at Cheryl. Suddenly, Cheryl's arm was grabbed by someone. Before she could react, she was pulled away. She regained her senses and realized she was in a familiar embrace. It was Gus. He held her to his chest. She heard a yelp. "What's wrong? What's wrong?" she asked anxiously. "I'm fine." The security guard accidentally tripped. Gus's voice was very soft, but his eyes were very cold. He looked at the security guard on the ground, who had fainted because of Gus's kick. There was a dagger next to the security guard. It turned out that no one was looking for Cheryl. The security guard tricked Cheryl out of the company and planned to kill her. But Gus had saved her because he followed her outside. He had grabbed her just in time, and he had kicked the security guard away. But he didn't want her to see, so he kept her close to him. Gus called for a security guard. "Go and inform Benny we need an ambulance for the security guard." He kept Cheryl in his arms. "What are you doing?" Cheryl exclaimed. "I want to hug you," Gus said. Cheryl was embarrassed and buried her face in Gus's arms. Gus looked at Benny, who was running over, and then held Cheryl as they went to the parking lot. They drove to Imperial Kitchen, where Emma and Wendy were already waiting. Wendy was excited to see Gus, but she cowered behind Emma when she saw Cheryl. "So her condition is not getting better?" Cheryl asked. Before she could finish, Gus coldly interrupted her. "Be quiet." The smile on Cheryl's face stiffened, and she said, "Sorry." "Cheryl didn't warn me about your attitude," Emma said. She looked at Gus reproachfully. Gus looked at Cheryl, who had her face lowered. Emma said to Cheryl, "Don't worry about him. That's just his personality." Cheryl nodded. Emma went to place their orders. After they ate, Cheryl excused herself to go to the bathroom. She overheard Emma and Gus talking while she was walking back toward them. You can stay with us, Gus said. Did you want to discuss this with Cheryl? Emma asked. What is there to discuss? It's my house, Gus said. Cheryl felt bitter when she heard Gus's words. Emma scolded him jokingly. Why would you say it like that? Mommy, I want to go to Godfather's place, Wendy said. Sure, we'll go there, Emma said. Cheryl walked to the front of the restaurant with them. Gus carried Wendy and told Cheryl, Take a taxi back first. I'll go to the hotel and fetch their luggage. No need. Gus and Cheryl go back home, and then Wendy and I can get the luggage and take a car to you, Emma said. No need. She can go back by herself. Gus suddenly remembered something and said, I will ask Benny to pick you up. Cheryl shook her head. I can take a taxi by myself. In the end, Gus took Cheryl to the taxi first. Then he took Emma and Wendy to the car. After getting into the car, he called Benny and told him the number of Cheryl's taxi. After Gus hung up the phone, Emma teased, You're so worried. Why don't you go back with her yourself? Gus did not say anything. Emma smiled and asked, She was working at the hospital for her internship, right? How do you know? Gus asked. We were there today for Wendy's treatment. We looked for her. But before Emma could finish, Gus said, Someone deliberately spread rumors and harmed her. Deliberately spreading rumors? Did you find out who it was? Emma asked. Yes, Gus replied. And we've already gotten revenge. That's good. After a pause, Emma asked, So is she not going back to work? Not for the time being, Gus said. Cheryl returned home and asked the maid to prepare the guest room on the first floor for Wendy and Emma. But Gus was skeptical of how Wendy felt toward Cheryl. When he turned to the house, he instead asked them to prepare the room on the second floor. Cheryl has already asked me to clean up the rooms on the first floor, the maid said hesitantly, looking at Cheryl. Gus paused and then answered, Didn't you hear what I said about cleaning up the second floor? Yes, sir, the maid said. She was afraid that Gus would get angry, so she hurried to the second floor. After the maid left, Cheryl said, I asked her to clean up the first floor. Why doesn't that work? Gus was holding Wendy, and before he could reply, Wendy started crying. Gus softened his face and tried to comfort Wendy. He brought her to the room she was going to share with Emma. After Emma had gotten them both ready for bed, Wendy refused to go to sleep in the room. She wanted to sleep with Gus. Gus naturally would not refuse. All right, Wendy can sleep with me. Don't spoil her. How are you going to sleep with Cheryl if you take her with you? Emma said. Wendy started crying, and Gus once again tried to calm her down. I will take her to sleep next door, Gus said. Sleep next door? Aren't you going back to your room? Emma asked. I'll stay up here so I can sleep with Wendy, Gus replied. That's not good, Emma said hesitantly. It's fine, Gus said. Wendy said goodnight to Mommy. We are going to sleep, he said to Wendy. Goodnight, Mommy, Wendy replied obediently. Emma saw her daughter sticking so close to Gus and had no choice. Good night. You have to listen to your godfather. Okay, Mommy, Wendy nodded. Gus brought Wendy into the room next door. He planned to wait for Wendy to fall asleep before going downstairs to tell Cheryl. But Wendy fell asleep holding him, so he didn't want to move and wake her up. When Cheryl opened her eyes the next day, she found that the bed beside her was empty. There were no signs of Gus sleeping at all. She stared blankly for a long time before she lifted the bedding and got up. Then she went to wash up and walked out of the room. Gus carried Wendy down the stairs with a smile on his face when Cheryl left the room. Cheryl was slightly stunned. She greeted Wendy. Good morning. The smile on Wendy's face immediately disappeared. Wendy, Aunt Cheryl greeted you. What should you say? Emma asked Wendy. It's okay, I startled her. Let me go prepare breakfast, Cheryl said, and she quickly went to the kitchen. Emma watched Cheryl leave in a hurry and apologized to Gus. "I'm sorry about Wendy." "It's okay. She's just a child," Gus said. During breakfast, Wendy was unhappy again. She didn't like what had been prepared, so Emma had to go to the kitchen to prepare something for her. After breakfast, Gus took Emma and Wendy to the doctor, and Cheryl sat in the living room and watched TV. At noon, Gus and the others did not come back. They still weren't back in the afternoon. During dinner, Cheryl called Gus. No one answered. Cheryl could only sit in the living room and wait for them. She waited until 8 o'clock in the evening. The sound of a car came from outside. Cheryl immediately jumped off the sofa, put on her slippers, and went to open the door. Just as she opened the door, she heard Wendy say, "Godfather, can you bring Wendy to eat at KFC next time? Mommy doesn't let me eat it." Emma said unhappily to Wendy, "Don't think your godfather will let you if I don't." "All right, Godfather will bring you there next time," Gus said. Wendy smiled happily. Gus knelt down to hug Wendy. He only stopped when Emma's voice sounded. "Cheryl, why didn't you come out?" Gus turned to look at Cheryl at the door of the house. She was standing under the light at the door. The light was shining on her face, so her face could not be seen clearly. He heard her say, "Oh, I heard the car and came out to open the door. It's cold outside, come in quickly." Then she turned around and entered the house. Then she opened the shoe cabinet and brought slippers for them. When they entered the house, the maid came out of the kitchen and asked, "Shall I prepare dinner?" Before Gus could answer, Emma said, "We've already eaten. Cheryl, have you eaten yet?" "Cheryl has been waiting for you," the maid replied. "I'm sorry. I didn't expect you to be waiting for us," Emma said. "It's okay." Cheryl shook her head at Emma and then turned to walk toward the dining room. Gus watched her walk away. He felt bad about her waiting for them. When Cheryl called him, he heard it, but he didn't answer because he was helping Wendy, and then he was bringing Emma and Wendy back, so he didn't bother returning her call. But he did not expect that she had been waiting for them to eat all this time. He put Wendy down and walked towards the dining room. "The dishes are cold. Let the maids heat them up." Cheryl looked up at him and said, "Don't bother. I can't eat much." After saying that, she lowered her head. Gus wanted to explain to Cheryl about the phone call, but Wendy was calling him from outside the dining room. "Godfather! Godfather, where are you?" Cheryl looked up and said to him, "Wendy is looking for you." "Okay, but I need to talk to you later," he said. Cheryl nodded, and Gus left the dining room. That night, Cheryl waited all night, but Gus did not return to his room. Cheryl was disappointed. She closed her eyes. When Gus brought Wendy downstairs for breakfast, he did not see Cheryl. He asked the maid, "Where is she?" "Cheryl is not up yet," the maid answered. Gus said to Emma, "You guys have breakfast first. I'll go get her." "Okay," Emma nodded and took Wendy to the dining room. Gus came to Cheryl's room and opened the door. Cheryl was sleeping soundly when she heard the sound of the door opening. Thinking that it was the maid, she opened her eyes and sat up. When she saw that it was Gus who came in, she was stunned. Gus was also stunned because Cheryl looked exhausted. It seemed like she had stayed up all night. Gus had completely forgotten that he was the one who asked Cheryl to wait for him yesterday. All he said was, "It's time for breakfast." Cheryl nodded and got up out of bed. Gus blankly watched Cheryl enter the bathroom. He suddenly remembered that he told Cheryl to wait for him yesterday. Had she waited for him all night? Gus's heart was very heavy. When Cheryl came out of the bathroom, she found Gus was still in the room. She felt that it was a little strange, but she did not ask any more questions. She only said, "Let's go and have breakfast," and then walked out of the room first. Gus silently followed behind her. Emma and Wendy were having breakfast. When Wendy saw Gus coming over, she waved her hand for him to come over and join her at the table. Gus paused, walked over and sat down. Cheryl sat on the other side. It looked like Gus, Emma, and Wendy were one family. She looked like an outsider. How could she have such thoughts? Cheryl shook her head and began to eat her breakfast. Cheryl was exhausted from staying up and waiting for Gus. After breakfast, she prepared to go back to her room to sleep. Before she did, Gus walked toward her. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Sorry I didn't come back to you last night," Gus said. Cheryl nodded. Then she said, "It's okay." Gus stared at the smile on her face for a few seconds and then said, "Yesterday when you called me, I was helping Wendy, so I didn't pick up." "I know," Cheryl nodded, then pointed behind Gus and said, "Wendy is looking for you." Gus turned around and looked over. Wendy was looking around. When she saw him, Wendy pounced over happily. "Godfather, Mommy said we should go back to the doctor together," she said. "Okay." Gus bent down and picked up Wendy. Then he said to Cheryl, "Do you want to go together?" "No, I didn't sleep well last night. I need to sleep," Cheryl said. "Did you wait for me all last night?" Gus asked. "No, I'm not that stupid," Cheryl said. Then she said goodbye to Wendy. Wendy timidly put her face into Gus's arms. This time Cheryl's face did not stiffen. She smiled as usual, then turned around and walked in the direction of her room. For some reason, Gus felt a little uncomfortable as he watched her walk away. At noon, Gus and the others returned. After lunch, Gus said to Cheryl, "I have something to do at the company later. Emma wants to take Wendy to the museum for an exhibit. You should go with them." After a pause, Gus said, "Todd is back. He will take you there." Gus had already arranged everything, so Cheryl couldn't refuse. It was also her responsibility to entertain guests. She nodded. Gus left to tell Emma about the plans for the museum. Wendy was upset when she heard that Gus would not be attending. Gus raised his hand and touched Wendy's little head. "Little darling, Godfather will go and do some work. After he's done, he will go and find you, okay?" Wendy nodded obediently. Gus kissed Wendy's forehead, then left in a hurry. Not long after Gus left, Todd came over. He greeted them all respectfully, and then escorted them to the car. Wendy and Emma sat in the back, and Cheryl sat in the front because she didn't want to upset Wendy. When they got to the museum, they walked toward the exhibit on the first floor. "I hear you're no longer at the hospital," Emma said as they walked. Cheryl was surprised to hear Emma mention the hospital. "Yes, I'm not there anymore," she said. "Don't worry about any rumors," Emma replied. "What?" Cheryl looked at Emma in confusion. Emma said, "Gus mentioned the rumors." Gus knew about the rumors? Cheryl was stunned. "Are you okay?" Emma asked. Cheryl came back to her senses and nodded. "If you don't want to work at that hospital, you can come to mine. Gus and Aiden were behind the planning," she said. When Cheryl heard Emma's words, she was surprised. Wasn't Emma's hospital founded by Aiden to prove his love for Emma? Why was it established by Gus and Aiden? Although Cheryl was very confused, she did not show it. She just said, "Maybe when the time comes." "Okay." Emma did not know what Cheryl was thinking. She assumed Cheryl was concerned about discussing any plans with Gus. Cheryl was distracted throughout the whole exhibit. Her mind was full of thoughts. Gus knew about the rumors in the hospital, but he had never asked about them. Finally, she came back to her senses when Emma called her name. "I have to go to the bathroom. Can you watch Wendy for a while?" Emma said. "Of course," Cheryl nodded. Emma looked at Wendy and said, "Stay here with Aunt Cheryl." "Wendy is going with Mommy," Wendy pouted. "Be good, little darling. Mommy will be back in a moment," Emma said. Wendy stood behind Cheryl reluctantly. She was frowning. Cheryl knelt down and said, "I will take you to see the painting, okay?" Wendy did not speak. Cheryl reached out to hold her hand and she dodged it. At this moment, a burly man rushed over and picked up Wendy. He turned around and ran. Cheryl was stunned for a moment. Then she shouted as she chased after him, "My child! He stole my child!" People around her stopped when they heard her yell and began to gather. But the man who held Wendy was still able to rush out with the child in his arms. He got onto the street and jumped into a car. Cheryl didn't even think about her actions. She just jumped into the car after him and grabbed Wendy. The man was pulling on Wendy in her arms, and Cheryl pulled herself out of the car and was slipping away from the man when he yanked the car door hard. Her arm was slammed between the car door. She was in incredible pain. There was a police siren in the distance. The man cracked open the door, pushed Cheryl's arm out and slammed it again, then sped away. Cheryl fell to the ground holding Wendy. Wendy was sobbing in her arms. Cheryl tried to comfort her, but her hands were in such pain, she couldn't move. Emma rushed over a few moments later. "Are you okay? What happened?" she cried as she picked Wendy up from Cheryl's arms. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have tried to take her to the painting," Cheryl said. A crowd had gathered behind them. "She saved that baby," someone cried. "You need to go get your arm checked out," another person yelled. "Thank you," Emma said. "We need to get you to the hospital." She pulled out her phone to make some calls. At first, Cheryl wanted to tell her not to call Gus, but she didn't say anything. Todd came over to pick them up in the car and take them to the hospital, where an X-ray showed that Cheryl's arm was broken. The car door had slammed so hard, they were surprised that it wasn't worse. While Cheryl was still in the exam room, Wendy, Emma, and Todd waited outside. Gus rushed over when he arrived at the hospital. "How is she? Where is she hurt?" he said. "Her arm is broken. The doctor is working on it," Emma said. Gus's entire face sank. He stared at Todd and said, "What are you doing? I asked you to follow them, but you let them get into trouble?" Todd lowered his head and did not speak. "This matter has nothing to do with Todd. I did not let Todd follow," Emma said. "I went to the bathroom and Wendy walked away from Cheryl, and someone rushed over. Cheryl chased the man outside to get Wendy. If you want to blame someone, blame Wendy," Emma said. "She got Wendy involved in this?" Gus suddenly said. "What?" Emma said. She looked at Gus in confusion. "There were 2 or 3 incidents that happened to her. I asked Benny to investigate. Someone is targeting her," Gus explained. Cheryl had just finished getting her cast applied when she walked to the door and overheard Gus explaining what had happened. She knew that it wasn't Wendy's fault, but her own fault. She had guessed that someone was targeting her, but now she knew it for certain. She was uncomfortable. "Miss, are you going out?" A nurse walked over from behind Cheryl. The nurse saw Cheryl standing at the door and did not move, so she asked. Cheryl apologized, then opened the door and walked out. When Gus and Emma saw Cheryl come out, they paused their conversation. "How are you?" Gus asked. "I'm okay," Cheryl said. "I'm sorry for causing such trouble. Wendy is probably still scared. You should take her and Emma home," she said to Gus. "Okay, I'll send you and Wendy back," Gus said. "No need. Stay with Cheryl and Todd can take us," Emma replied. Cheryl spoke up. "Let Gus take you," she said. "Wendy wants to be with him." Emma couldn't refuse. "Take good care of yourself. I'll see you tomorrow," she told Cheryl. After the others left, Cheryl slowly turned around and walked to her hospital room. Todd followed her. "Do you want to lie down for a while?" Cheryl shook her head and asked, "Where have you been recently?" Todd was stunned when he heard Cheryl's words. Then he replied, "I went out of town for work for Gus." Cheryl replied, "Oh." Then she asked, "When did you return to the capital?" "I came back early this morning," Todd said. Cheryl went to bed. Todd had wanted to help her, but she refused. "No need. It's not like both of my hands are broken," she said. "I'm outside. If you need anything, just call me," Todd said. Cheryl nodded. After Todd left, Cheryl leaned against the bed and sat for a while. In her mind, she recalled the conversation between Gus and Emma. Not long after, Gus came over after bringing Emma and Wendy. Cheryl thought that he would not come, but when she saw him come in, she suddenly blurted out, "Why are you here?" Gus frowned. "I shouldn't have come," he said. "Wendy was so scared to be alone with me," Cheryl said. Gus pursed his lips and didn't say anything. Cheryl understood that he was worried about Wendy. She said, "You can go back. It's not easy for Wendy. I understand." "I'll go back after dinner," Gus said. Cheryl didn't reply. When dinner came to the hospital room, Cheryl struggled to hold the fork with her left hand. Gus put down his fork and picked up Cheryl's bowl. "I'll feed you." Cheryl's face turned red. Then she shook her head. "No need. I'll eat slowly with a spoon." "I'll feed you," Gus insisted. In the end, Cheryl had no choice but to let Gus feed her. Gus fed her first. When he finally ate, the food was already cold. "It's already cold. Do you want another serving?" Cheryl asked. Gus shook his head and continued to eat. After finishing the meal, Gus fetched water for Cheryl to wash her face and wash her hands. After that, he took his coat and left. When he passed by the reception room, he saw Todd sitting there looking at his phone. Gus frowned and said, "I told you to stay here, not to play with your phone." Todd quickly put his phone away. "Sorry." "Keep an eye on this place. If something goes wrong, you're the one who will have to explain what happened," Gus said. Todd nodded seriously. Gus looked back at the ward, then turned and left. Elsewhere, Sue said excitedly, "I heard that Cheryl's hand is broken. Is it our people who did it?" "Not fully," said Matt Sullivan, the leader of the Sullivan family. "Our men were not going to do anything, because when Cheryl went out yesterday, there were other people accompanying her. Unexpectedly, someone snatched the child that Cheryl brought with her. When Cheryl went to chase after the child, her hand was broken." When she heard Matt's words, Sue's eyes flashed with gloominess. Matt looked at her and said, "That group of people provoked the police. Do you think our people have a chance?" Sue's eyes did not say anything. Matt knew that Sue wanted Cheryl to die. It was just that Cheryl was lucky and dodged every time. Matt did not agree with Sue's way of doing things. The Sullivan family was connected to the Doyle family because of Sue and Jenna. However, Jenna was sent to Germany by Gus. Therefore, if Sue wanted to kill Cheryl, the Sullivan family had no choice but to cooperate. "Wait for the next opportunity." "I know." Elsewhere, Rachel was calling someone. "Have you already revealed the clues of the Sullivan family?" "Got it. Don't expose yourself. If there's anything, I'll look for you," she said. After hanging up the phone, Rachel's face revealed a pleased smile. She had been monitoring Sue's actions. Originally, when she saw Sue and Gus start to fight, she was very satisfied. But she did not expect Emma to bring Wendy to D.C. and stay with Gus and Cheryl. Emma and her daughter were Aiden's flesh and blood. How could Rachel let go of this opportunity? She immediately arranged for people to snatch Emma and Aiden's daughter. She did not expect Cheryl to protect Emma and Aiden's daughter with all her might. In the end, her people were unsuccessful. When she heard this news, she wanted to hand responsibility over to the Sullivan family, to have Gus square up against them. She believed that if Cheryl's hand was broken, Gus would take on the Sullivans, which would cause a confusion with Sue Doyle, who was related to the Sullivan family. In the end, the goal was for Zachary to lose his footing in the Doyle family. All she needed to do was sit and watch the two of them fight. Rachel's plan was perfect, but she had forgotten that her plan could not keep up with the changes. When Gus returned to the house, Emma was on the phone. Wendy was in her arms. Seeing Gus return, Wendy immediately jumped out of Emma's arms. "Godfather, you're back!" Gus picked Wendy up. The baby stayed in Gus's arms and looked behind Gus. "Where's Aunt Cheryl?" Gus was surprised to hear Wendy ask for Cheryl. Wendy had been afraid of her. When Cheryl called for her, she hid in fear. Now, she asked for Cheryl for the first time in her life. "What is Wendy looking for Aunt Cheryl for?" Gus asked. "Aunt Cheryl saved me. Mommy said that Aunt Cheryl was injured in the hospital and Godfather went to take care of her. But Godfather came back. Why didn't Aunt Cheryl come back?" Wendy replied. "Aunt Cheryl hasn't recovered yet. When she has recovered, she will come back," Gus replied. "Then tomorrow, Godfather will bring me to see Aunt Cheryl, okay?" Wendy asked. Gus nodded. After Emma hung up the phone, she asked Gus, "Didn't you go to the hospital to take care of Cheryl? Why are you back?" "She's fine. I came back to see Wendy," Gus replied. "It's okay. Todd is there." "Is Todd the same as you?" Emma asked. Gus fell silent. Emma saw that he did not speak, so she did not say anything else. She brought Wendy upstairs. Gus stood there for a while, then drove back to the hospital. Todd was shocked to see him come so late. "Why are you here?" "I will stay with her. You go and rest," Gus replied. Todd nodded and left. After watching Todd leave, Gus quietly walked into the room. Cheryl was lying on the bed. Her hands were probably hurting. She slept very uneasily and kept moving. Seeing that she was not sleeping well, Gus felt glad that he had come back. He sat on the other side of Cheryl and reached out to hold Cheryl in his arms and keep her from moving too much. She was rolling over close to her arm and then jolting awake because of the dull pain. She drifted in and out of sleep and felt a light pat on her uninjured arm. Gus was supporting her so that when she moved, she was not rolling onto her injured arm. Cheryl awoke after a while. You, when did you come?" she asked. When did this person get into her bed? Why did she not feel anything at all? "A few hours ago." Gus lowered his head and kissed her forehead. "Are you okay? Since you're awake, do you want to sit up for a while?" Cheryl nodded. She used her uninjured left hand to support herself by the side of the bed and tried to sit up. Gus quickly held her shoulder and helped her sit up. He took Cheryl's jacket from the other end of the bed and put it on for her. Then he asked, "Do you want water?" Cheryl shook her head and said, while removing the sheets, "I want to go to the bathroom." "I'll take you there," Gus said. Cheryl blushed, but did not refuse. After going to the bathroom, Gus helped Cheryl wash up again. Then Todd brought breakfast for the two of them. Shortly after, Emma called to check on Cheryl. Gus went to go pick up Emma and Wendy and bring them back to the hospital. Not long after Gus left, Benny came to visit. "How are you doing?" he asked. "I'm okay," Cheryl said. "That's good," Benny nodded and said, "I should have come to see you yesterday. I'm sorry I'm late." Cheryl smiled and said, "It's okay." "Where's Gus?" Benny asked. "He's picking up Emma and Wendy. He should be back later," Cheryl replied. "Okay," Benny said. "Then I'll wait for him here." After Benny chatted with Cheryl for a while, he went outside to talk with Todd. When he was outside, Cheryl needed help to reposition her sling, but she could not reach the button to press for help from a nurse. She stood up and walked outside to try and find some help. When she walked in the hall, she happened to overhear Benny and Todd chatting. "Benny, who exactly is targeting Cheryl and getting Wendy involved?" Todd asked. "What do you mean?" Benny asked with a frown. Todd paused for a second and asked, "Did Gus say to comfort Emma?" "What do you mean by comforting Emma?" Benny rolled his eyes. "Isn't that obvious? Gus has always felt strongly about Emma. He doesn't want her to feel worried," Todd said. Benny's expression changed when he heard Todd's words. "Don't say things like that," Benny said seriously. "I know, Aiden and Emma are very happy now," Todd said. This was the first time he had seen Benny so angry. He quickly shut his mouth. He did not know that Cheryl had just come out and heard him. She felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Of course she knew what they were saying. Gus liked Emma. She knew that Gus and Emma were not related by blood. Emma was John's biological daughter, and Gus was John's adopted son. But she didn't understand that their relationship could go beyond this. Now she understood. Emma was why he changed his decision of abandoning his relationship with her. Emma was why he agreed to marry her. She always thought that Gus respected Emma. Now she realized that he cared more for her. He did not want Emma to make things difficult for him, so he agreed to marry Cheryl. No wonder he took Emma's phone calls so seriously. No wonder he treated Wendy like his own daughter. Cheryl didn't want to accept this reality. Gus had been really good to her recently. Perhaps he had feelings for her as well. Thinking of this, a glimmer of hope lit up in Cheryl's heart. It was impossible for him and Emma to be together. As long as she worked hard, there was still a chance between them. Cheryl took a step forward, and Benny and Todd heard her and turned around. "Cheryl, why did you get out of bed?" Benny asked. After Cheryl explained, Benny went to find a nurse, and Todd helped her back to her room. Gus returned with Emma and Wendy shortly after. Cheryl carefully observed Gus and Emma. She found that they were no different from very close friends. Her confidence increased a little. "Is everything okay?" Emma saw Cheryl staring at her and asked. Cheryl came back to her senses and said, "Everything is fine. And Wendy has been doing well, right? There are some fruits in the bag under the coffee table," she continued. "Wendy can have some." "It's okay, we're leaving," Emma said. Cheryl frowned. "Why are you in such a hurry?" "I need to bring Wendy to the doctor, and then I have some errands to finish," Emma said. Gus offered to take them, but Emma refused. She left with Wendy. After she left, Cheryl told Gus that Benny was looking for her earlier in the day, and he went outside the room to find him. Benny was waiting for Gus outside. When he saw Gus come out of the room, he immediately came to greet him. "We figured out who was behind this," Benny said. "Who?" Gus asked. "It's the Sullivan family," Benny said. "The Sullivan family?" Gus frowned. He knew a lot about the families in the capital, but he didn't know anything about the Sullivan family. The Sullivan family was originally not involved with major action. 20 years ago, after Sue married Zachary, the Sullivan family began to slowly change. Now it's one of the forces of the Doyle family. Benny paused for a moment and then said, "Sue must be angry for what happened to Jenna. That's why she wanted to kill Cheryl." "What about Zachary?" Gus asked. "Zachary doesn't know about this. He didn't participate," Benny replied. Gus narrowed his eyes and said, "Investigate the Sullivan family and figure out who exactly is behind this." Benny agreed, and Gus returned to the room. He took the bag of fruits that Cheryl had mentioned and prepared them on a plate, and then brought them to her. He offered her the fruit one by one. Cheryl didn't have much of an appetite, but with someone feeding her, especially Gus, she was more willing to eat. After the plate was finished, Gus asked if Cheryl wanted any more fruit. "No need, that's enough." Cheryl shook her head. Gus put the plate on the table. He got up and went to the bathroom. A few minutes later, he carried out a basin of water and a towel. He wiped Cheryl's face and washed her hands. Then he started to clean up the trash. After cleaning up the trash, he asked Cheryl, "Are you feeling tired? Do you need a nap?" "I've rested for a while," she said. "The more you sleep, the better you'll recover," he said. Cheryl heard his words and burst into laughter. "Who did you hear it from?" "Isn't that the advice from next door?" Gus asked. "No." Cheryl shook her head and asked, "How did you hear that from next door?" "A child next door broke his leg and his mother said it," Gus answered very seriously. Cheryl looked embarrassed. Was Gus treating her like a child? Bones need calcium. Sleeping is useless, Cheryl said. Calcium replenishment. Did the doctor give you any? I asked Todd to buy some too, Gus said. Where is it? I didn't see you eat it. In the drawer. I eat it once a day. I ate it at noon, Cheryl said. Do you want to eat some now? Gus asked. Cheryl nodded. Gus got up and found the calcium tablets from the drawer. He opened the lid and asked, How many do you want? 2, Cheryl said. Gus poured 2 from the bottle for her and then brought water. You can chew them. You don't need to drink water, Cheryl said. Gus smiled and put the water back. Cheryl thought that Gus would go back to the house for the evening to spend time with Wendy. But he came back at night, and unexpectedly after dinner, Gus sat by the hospital bed and started to read documents. Aren't you going back? Cheryl asked, after staring at him for a long time. No. Gus did not even raise his head to answer. What about Wendy? Cheryl asked. Before, she did not realize Gus liked Emma, so now she knew the reason why he valued Wendy so much and felt a little bitter. Emma will bring her, Gus replied. Cheryl opened her mouth and wanted to say something, but in the end she did not say anything. Then she removed the blanket and got off the bed. Gus saw her get off the bed and immediately put down the documents in his hands and stood up. What do you want to do? I want to take a bath, Cheryl said. Take a bath? Gus was stunned. Yes, I didn't take a bath last night. I feel very uncomfortable. I want to take a bath. After saying that, Cheryl walked to the cabinet. She used her uninjured left hand to open the cabinet and take her clothes. Gus walked over and helped her take out her clothes from the cabinet. Gus said, I'll go and start the water. Wait a moment. Then Gus took the clothes and went into the bathroom. About 10 minutes later, he came out. The water is ready. Cheryl walked into the bathroom, and he insisted on coming with her. But Cheryl closed the door quickly. He waited outside until finally he called in. Are you done? Let me help you put on some clothes. Cheryl stared at the mirror angrily for a few seconds, and then replied, Come in. Gus helped lead her out of the bathroom and then helped her into bed. Then he went back into the bathroom. Cheryl heard the water turn on. Gus was in there for almost half an hour. When he came out, he was wrapped in a towel. He quickly pulled open the cabinet and took out the clothes that Todd had brought for him during the day. Then he walked to the sofa and laid down. The hospital sofa was one of the larger ones in the rooms, but Gus was tall and big. It was hard for him to get comfortable. Cheryl did not understand why Gus had to lie on the sofa. Didn't he sleep on the hospital bed with her yesterday? After staring at Gus's back for a few seconds, she spoke. Why don't you go back to the house? There's nothing for you to do here. No need. Don't worry about it, he said. Cheryl finally said, Well, don't sleep on the sofa. The bed is very wide. Come and sleep with me. Gus didn't move for a while. When he finally entered the bed, Cheryl had already fallen asleep. He removed the blanket and was about to climb onto the bed, when suddenly there was a very subtle sound outside. His smiling eyes instantly turned cold and sharp. He quickly turned off the lights in the room, then walked outside. As soon as he turned the corner of the room, there was a gun in his face. Gus's vision focused, then he dashed over and struck the wrist of the gun holder with his palm. With a bang, the gun landed on the ground. Gus walked toward the opponent, and the man backed up step by step. They began to exchange blows until Gus forced the other man down. He used his powerful leg to press down on the opponent's back, twisting the joints of his arm. 2 cracking sounds came as the man yelled out in despair. His cries alerted the doctors and nurses on duty. They ran over and found Gus beating someone up. They were very scared. Someone tried to intervene, but before they could move, they were met with Gus's cold gaze. Gus's left hand pressed down on the criminal's back. With his right hand, he pulled out 2 more guns from the man's waist. Gus then delivered one final blow to the man's head, knocking him out. Gus didn't even look at the doctors and nurses staring at him. He walked straight back to Cheryl's room while they called the police. Gus called Todd over. Todd arrived in less than 10 minutes. When he saw the man passed out in the hall, he was stunned. He entered the hospital with a gun and I knocked him out, Gus said. Do we think he's from the Sullivan family? Todd asked. I think so. I put the gun away. When Benny arrives, you can give it to him, Gus said. Todd nodded. Just as he was about to say something, 2 policemen came over. The doctors and nurses had directed him to Gus. This man wanted to attack Cheryl, Todd explained. Gus knocked him unconscious in self-defense. The 2 policemen first checked the criminal on the ground. After confirming that they were not dead, they said to Gus, Sir, regardless of whether you are in self-defense or not, we need to investigate. Come with us. Gus nodded and slowly stood up. Todd quickly stopped him. You cannot go with them. If I don't go, the Sullivans will alert them, Gus replied. But if you go, what should I tell Cheryl? Todd asked. Gus frowned slightly. Then he said, Think of an excuse. Don't let her find out what happened tonight. Todd agreed. When Gus was brought to the police station, he went straight into the interrogation room, but he answered every question with silence. The police saw that Gus did not cooperate and were about to get angry when the door of the interrogation room opened. The chief and a young lawyer wearing glasses came in from outside. Mr. Luke Long, please. Mr. Long walked to Gus. He said respectfully, Gus, are you okay? Gus nodded and asked, Did Benny ask you to come here? Yes. Mr. Luke Long nodded and replied. Follow the procedure, Gus said. Mr. Luke Long wanted to say something, but Gus looked at him sharply. He quickly nodded. Mr. Luke Long shook Gus's hand. Then he said to the police chief, Scott Lohr, who had brought him here earlier, Chief Lohr, I have something to trouble you with. Mr. Long was known to be one of the best lawyers in the country. The police chief knew better than to counter him with anything. He gestured to the chief to follow him out of the interrogation room. He wants to follow the procedure and stay in the police station for 24 hours, he explained. Okay, the chief said. He will be fine here. After sending the lawyer off, the chief arranged for a room for Gus. Meanwhile, the Sullivan family had received news that not only did their men not kill Cheryl, but they were also at risk of being questioned from the police. The Sullivan family was worried that the police would know that it was one of their hired men who had tried to kill Cheryl. They didn't even realize how Gus would plan to get revenge on them. Cheryl woke up the next day and found that Gus was not in the room. She thought maybe he had woken up earlier than her, but she found no signs of Gus sleeping on the bed beside her. There was no one in the bathroom and no one in the living room. Cheryl pulled open the door of the room and saw Todd standing outside. Todd heard the door open and immediately turned around. When he saw Cheryl, he was first stunned. Then he said, Cheryl, why did you get up so early? Why are you here? Where is he? Cheryl asked. Todd thought for a while and replied, Wendy was having trouble last night, so he went back to comfort her. Cheryl had guessed that might be the case. Her heart fell. Wendy was the child of the woman he cared for, and the child he liked the most. It would make sense that he would leave her alone in the hospital for Wendy. Oh, Cheryl said softly, and then she turned around to re-enter her room. Todd watched her leave. Her spirits had fallen. Cheryl was fine before. Why did she suddenly feel sad? Well, she probably missed Gus. Todd wondered when Gus would return. The lawyer had said he would be out within 24 hours. The man who had attacked had regained consciousness while they were dealing with Gus and had run away, so the police did not have any evidence. This would have made it more difficult for Gus to be released without proof that he attacked in self-defense. But Gus was very powerful, and his lawyer was very feared and well known in the city. When Gus came out of the police station, Benny picked him up. After getting into the car, Gus asked, "Is it someone from the Sullivan family?" Benny nodded. Gus had already guessed this, but Benny confirmed his suspicions. However, he did not expect that before Cheryl was discharged from the hospital, the Sullivan family would try and strike again. Gus's eyes were gloomy. Then he asked, "How is the evidence collected against them?" "It's almost done," Benny said. It was almost time. Gus was silent for a few seconds. "Let's start." "Yes," Benny nodded. Gus nodded. He took out his phone from his pocket and called Todd. Todd answered the call very quickly. "Hello, Gus. Are you out of the police station?" he asked. "Yes." "Did she find out about what happened last night?" Gus said. "When she woke up this morning, she asked where you went," Todd replied. "What did you tell her?" Gus asked. "I told her that Wendy was very upset, so you had gone back to help her," Todd said. Todd's excuse was clearly a good one. For some reason, Gus felt uncomfortable. Todd did not hear Gus's reply. He asked carefully, "Was that okay?" Gus replied, "Is she asleep now?" "She went to sleep early today, yes," Todd said. "I'm going to Benny's place to take care of things tonight. I'll go to the hospital tomorrow afternoon," Gus said. "Tomorrow afternoon?" Todd asked. "Yes. Why?" Gus asked. "The attending doctor came this afternoon and checked on Cheryl. She has recovered well. She said she can be discharged soon," Todd replied. There were too many people in the hospital. It was easy to get into trouble. If Cheryl went back to the house where he could take care of her, it would be much more convenient. Gus said, "Okay. Tomorrow, arrange for her to be discharged and return to the house." Todd agreed, and they got off the phone. The next morning, Cheryl was having breakfast. Todd told her that she would be discharged from the hospital later. Before, Cheryl would have asked about Gus, but now she knew that he had left to help Wendy and Emma. She didn't bother asking. Todd noticed that she didn't bring him up. He glanced at her and then said, "Gus had something to do, so he will meet us back at the house later after you are discharged," he said. "I know." Cheryl nodded and continued to eat her breakfast with a spoon in her left hand. After Cheryl finished her breakfast, he helped her clean up. He went to go handle the paperwork at the nurse's station, and when he came back, Cheryl had already packed herself up. "Why didn't you wait for me to come back to pack?" he asked. "It's nothing. It didn't take me long," she said. Todd nodded and passed her the paperwork and guidelines for her injury. Cheryl flipped through the list and put it in her bag. Todd carried Cheryl's suitcase and walked out of the hospital with Cheryl. She hadn't told the maid that she would be home, so she was very surprised when she came back. The maid helped her bring her luggage to the room and unpack, and then asked her what she wanted to eat for lunch. "Anything," Cheryl said. "I've gotten sick of the hospital food, but whatever Emma and Wendy would eat too." "When they went out, they said they would not come back to eat," the maid said. Cheryl assumed that meant Gus, Emma, and Wendy. She slightly darkened her eyes and replied, "Then you can just get me something to eat." At noon, Emma and the others weren't back, but Cheryl ate lunch quickly by herself and then went to the sofa to watch television. Not long after, there was the sound of a car outside. She stood up from the sofa to see if Gus had returned. Then she remembered he would probably be accompanying Emma and Wendy, so she sat back down. Outside, Aiden carried Wendy as he got out of the taxi with Emma. He put Wendy down and said to Emma, "I'm in a hurry, so I won't go in today. I'll come and see Cheryl another day." Emma nodded and then said to Wendy, "Say goodbye to Daddy." "Bye, Daddy," Wendy waved at Aiden. "Goodbye. Daddy will come back to pick you and Mommy up tonight." Aiden nodded, and kissed Wendy on the cheek. Then he got into a taxi and left. After watching the taxi leave, Emma led Wendy into the house. As they were walking up to the door, Gus's car pulled into the driveway. Wendy knew Gus's car. When she saw Gus's car coming over, she immediately pulled Emma's hand. "Mommy, Godfather is back." Emma thought that Gus was bringing Cheryl back, so she stopped outside the door to welcome Cheryl when she got out of the car. But she did not expect that Gus would exit the car without her. "Where is Cheryl?" Emma looked into the car and asked. "Wasn't she discharged? Why didn't she come back with you?" "She was discharged. She came back with Todd this morning." "How did you know she was discharged?" Gus asked. "I went to the hospital with Aiden in the morning. The nurse said she was discharged," Emma said. Gus raised his eyebrows when he heard Emma say that Aiden was here. "He's here." "He just arrived today," Emma said. Gus nodded and waved at Wendy. Wendy immediately let go of Emma's hand and threw herself into his arms. Gus picked up Wendy and walked into the house with Emma. When they entered the house together, Cheryl assumed that they had been with each other all morning. Her eyes were sad, but Wendy now was very eager to spend time with her since she now trusted her. When it was time for dinner, Wendy still wanted to sit with Cheryl. She was stopped by Emma. "Aunt Cheryl's hand is hurting. Don't mess around," she said. If Wendy couldn't sit with Cheryl, she wanted to sit with Gus. So again, it was Cheryl sitting alone at the end of the table, and Gus, Emma, and Wendy sitting close together. Now that Cheryl knew how Gus felt about Emma, seeing this made her sad. She knew that anything happening between Gus and Emma was impossible, but she couldn't help but think about it. She was quiet as she slowly struggled to eat with her left hand. Gus wanted to offer to help her eat, but he felt bad that he had not spent much time at the hospital with her. Occasionally, he handed her some of her favorite vegetables. Cheryl was not too hungry, so she finished before the rest of them. "I don't feel well," she said. "I want to go back to sleep. I'm going to go back to my room." The rest of them nodded. Cheryl stood up and left the dining room and went back to her bedroom. After dinner, Emma was going to take Wendy to the hotel where Aiden was staying. Because Cheryl had already returned to her room to rest, she did not go and say goodbye to Cheryl. She only said to Gus, "Please tell Cheryl that we had to leave and we wanted to say goodbye." Gus nodded and asked, "Are you guys going to take a taxi?" "Aiden was going to call one and drop us off," Emma said. "I can take you," Gus said. Emma didn't object. He drove them to the hotel where Aiden was staying. When they entered the lobby, Aiden was waiting for them. "Emma, can you take Wendy up? I have to discuss something with Gus." "Okay," Emma nodded, and then took Wendy into the elevator. Aiden brought Gus to a VIP room on the first floor of the hotel. "I heard that this incident wasn't an accident," he said. "Someone has been targeting her," Gus replied. "Have you found the person?" Aiden asked. "Yes." Gus paused for a moment and said, "It has something to do with the Doyle family." Aiden was a little surprised when he heard Gus's words. Then he replied, "I will talk about this with Robert." "Sure," Gus nodded, and then said, "The whole thing seems a bit off to me." Aiden asked, "What's wrong?" "I don't know. I have a feeling," Gus said. Aiden said, "Be careful." Gus nodded, then he asked, "When are you going back to New York?" "In a few days. I have a client here," Aiden said. Gus nodded. "Let me know before you leave. Let's have dinner together." Gus and Aiden arranged to have a meal before Aiden left town. However, they did not expect that they would not be able to ever have that meal. Rachel originally wanted the drama to unfold slowly, but she didn't expect Aiden to come to the capital. She had to report to the higher-ups. "Aiden came to the capital. He must have brought his wife and daughter back. If we let them go just like that, I'm afraid we won't have another chance," she said. "I know, but Aiden isn't that easy to deal with," said the man on the other end of the phone. "We need to deal with him. We can seize the opportunity to capture his wife and daughter." Then we can trick the bodyguard Gus arranged for Cheryl. Then we can catch Cheryl and kill 2 birds with 1 stone, Rachel said. Arrange for the capture. When the time comes, Aiden will have to submit, said the man on the phone. Rachel agreed and ended the call. Cheryl woke up the next day and found that Gus, Emma, and Wendy were not there. She did not find it strange. She just thought that Gus had gone out with them. When she saw Todd in the villa, she was extremely surprised. "Why are you here?" she asked. "Gus asked me to help you with errands," Todd said. "I don't need to run errands." Cheryl was stunned for a moment before she answered. But Todd was not there to run errands. He was there for protection. Gus was worried about the Sullivan family attacking. "Well, these were Gus's orders," Todd said. In the end, Cheryl did not chase Todd away. She had nothing to do, so she just let him relax in the house. During lunch, the maid made Cheryl her favorite braised fish. Usually, Cheryl loved to eat it, but today, she only took a bite and then immediately had to go to the bathroom because she thought she was going to be sick. But when she went to the bathroom, she no longer needed to vomit. The maid was waiting for her when she left the bathroom. "Cheryl, what's wrong?" "Nothing. Just now I felt a little nauseous, but now I feel fine," Cheryl said. "What is it?" Cheryl turned back to look at the maid. The maid originally thought that Cheryl's vomiting reaction was a little like pregnancy, but then she remembered that Cheryl had been taking contraceptives. "Is there something wrong with your stomach?" she asked. "It's possible. Let's eat first," Cheryl nodded, and then returned to the dining room. This time, Cheryl did not eat the braised fish. She just ate rice. Todd heard the maid say that Cheryl's stomach was not feeling well. He said, "Do you want to take some stomach medicine?" Cheryl shook her head. "No need. Let's see what happens in 2 days." Todd nodded and chatted with Cheryl while watching TV. Not long after, his phone's message beeped. He took out his phone from his pocket and saw the message on it. It was from Emma. "Todd, I have an urgent issue to deal with. Can you come to the hotel?" the message said. After Todd read the message, he stood up and said to Cheryl, "I have to go meet with Emma." Cheryl nodded. "Go ahead. Drive carefully." Not long after Todd drove away, the doorbell rang. Cheryl wanted to open the door, but the maid had already run out of the kitchen. Cheryl continued to watch TV. She listened to the maid open the door. Then she heard the maid ask the person outside who they were looking for. Then she heard a sound, and something fell to the ground. Cheryl frowned and stood up. As she walked out, she asked, "What's wrong? Who's here?" She had yet to reach the entrance. A man in a long black windbreaker and a mask came in. "Who are you?" "You don't need to know who I am. You just need to know that I'm here for you." The man's muffled voice came from the mask. "Why are you looking for me? I don't know you. Get out!" Cheryl wanted to chase him away, but found that the maid was lying at the entrance. Her eyes widened and she stepped back. "What are you doing?" "I'm here to catch you." As the man spoke, he took out a handkerchief from his pocket. Cheryl stepped back and looked at the man warily. With a swift step, he arrived in front of her and grabbed her hair. "Help!" Cheryl called for help while desperately grabbing the man. The man frowned and covered Cheryl's nose and mouth with the handkerchief. Cheryl struggled a few times, and her body went limp. The man picked up Cheryl and walked out of the house. At the entrance of the house, there was a black Audi parked. The door opened and the person inside shouted at the man, "Why did you take so long?" "This woman is a bit difficult to deal with," the man said. "Cut the crap. Come on," said a voice from the driver's seat. The man in the windbreaker brought Cheryl into the car, and then the Audi quickly drove away. When Todd was driving to meet Emma, he realized that it was probably better for Benny to meet with her, so that he could make sure he was still protecting Cheryl. He called Benny to let him know, then drove back to the house. But by the time he returned, the Audi had already left. Seeing the house's door open, Todd immediately had a bad feeling. He parked the car quickly and raced to the house. The maid was lying in the entrance. Todd ran into the house while shouting, "Cheryl!" Cheryl, who had been watching TV in the living room earlier that day, had disappeared. The living room was a little messy. Todd walked around and finally picked up the handkerchief that was lying on the ground. He put it by his nose and smelled it. Then he quickly called Gus. Gus was currently busy dealing with the Sullivan family. When he heard his phone ring, he took it out of his pocket. Without looking at it, he put it beside his ear. He was staring at the computer. But when he heard Todd say that Cheryl was taken away, he jumped up from his seat. "Didn't I ask you to go to the house to protect her? How did you protect her?" he asked. "Emma asked me to come meet her for an urgent matter, so I started driving to the hotel. But halfway there, I called Benny to take over so I could go back to Cheryl," Todd said. Gus tightened his grip on the phone and said, "I'm afraid Emma's message was a trap." "A trap? You mean Emma is also—" Before Todd could finish his sentence, he was interrupted by Gus. "Go and look for the property management near the house. They have a surveillance camera in the residential area." "Yes, Gus." Gus cut off the phone and called Emma. Emma's phone was not working. He said to Benny, "Todd asked you to arrange for someone to pick up Emma. Did they pick her up?" "I'll call and ask." Benny called his subordinate after he finished speaking. The news he got was that he did not find Emma at the hotel. "Seems like they also have Emma," Gus said. His face darkened. He then called Aiden, but Aiden didn't pick up. He hung up the phone and asked Benny, "Has the Sullivan family made any moves?" "We didn't think so," Benny said. How is that possible? Gus felt that he had missed something, but he couldn't find the reason. Finally, he said, "Let's go to the Sullivan family." Gus's original plan was to destroy the Sullivan family's economy first. Then he would hand over the dirty business of the Sullivan family to the higher-ups. He wanted the Sullivan family to collapse completely. But now, Gus couldn't wait any longer. He brought some of his bodyguards with him to visit the family. In his office, Matt Sullivan was trying to figure out how to resolve some issues with the family business when he was told there was someone on the phone. "I don't have time to talk with them," Matt said impatiently. "So, the head of the Sullivan family does not have time to see me? Then I'll be forced to announce what the Sullivan family has been doing for years." Cold voice came from the other end of the phone. Matt shuddered violently and then asked, Who are you?" "You will know soon." The person on the other side hung up. Matt had a meeting that was about to start, but he didn't care about the meeting anymore. He grabbed his phone and rushed out. His secretary hurried behind him. "Sir, the meeting is going to start," he yelled. But Matt ignored him. He drove his car back to his house. When he arrived home, the first person he saw was Gus. His lungs were bursting with anger. "Why are you here?" "I'm looking for someone," Gus replied. Matt looked confused. "Who do you want?" "Cheryl, Emma, Wendy," Gus said. When Matt heard Gus's words, he was first stunned. Then he replied, "I don't have the person you want here. I don't know the person you're talking about. You'd better leave the Sullivan family with your people, or I'll call the police." November 15th, number 8 subway station, arranged for people to push Cheryl off the platform. December 5th, a car accident. December 8th, a flower pot fell down and almost hit Cheryl's head. These 3 things were not done by you? Gus's eyes were terrifyingly cold. Matt did not expect Cheryl's man to know everything. "Where are they now?" Gus asked. As the patriarch of the Sullivan family, Matt was an incredibly powerful man, but he had never dealt with someone with such an imposing manner. "They are not here," Matt said. Gus looked at Benny. Benny stepped in front of Matt with a rage in his eyes. "You better tell the truth. Aren't you afraid of committing crimes?" Matt opened his eyes wide. A crime? Why would we be nervous about committing crimes when that's all you've been doing? Matt saw that they did not seem to be joking. The incident at the subway station, the car accident, and the flower pot were all arranged by me. But the kidnapping of the child and the incident today have nothing to do with me, Matt said. You don't have them, Gus said. He narrowed his eyes. Yes. Last time, when the man I sent to the hospital came back, he said you were strong. I did not dare to do anything more, Matt said. Gus was about to say something when his phone rang. He took his phone out of his pocket and saw an unfamiliar number on it. He paused for a moment and then pressed the answer button. Hello? An unfamiliar voice came from the other side. Your woman is in my hands now. Who are you? Why did you capture her? Gus replied. You'll know who I am when you come, the other party said. Okay, I'll come. Where are you? Gus answered without thinking. The man on the phone quickly gave him the address. You have Emma and Wendy too? Gus asked. The other side replied, Yes. Aiden's phone is not working. You better inform him and ask him to save his wife and daughter. At this moment, Gus finally understood why he felt that something was wrong. The people of Sullivan family were going to attack Cheryl. They would not attack Wendy. He thought that Cheryl had gotten Emma and Wendy involved. Now he understood that the other party's goal was him and Aiden. Gus took a deep breath and answered, I know. I will inform him. The other side snorted and cut off the phone. Gus called Aiden again, but Aiden's phone was still off. He could not get through. He cut off the phone and said to Benny, Go and think of a way to find Aiden. Benny looked at Gus in confusion. I'll go there first. After you find him, tell him to meet me. Gus opened the door and got into the car. He stepped on the accelerator and the car flew out. After watching Gus's car leave, Benny immediately left the Sullivan family with the rest of the bodyguards. The Sullivan family needed to be dealt with, but not now. The most important thing right now was to find Cheryl, Emma, and Wendy. But first, Benny needed to find Aiden. Matt immediately collapsed into the couch when Gus left. He had been worried that Gus would kill him. A moment later, the patriarch of the Sullivan family, Otis, came out into the living room. What just happened? Who were those people just now? He asked. That man just now was Cheryl's husband, Matt replied. Otis scoffed. How can he threaten us like this? If he does this, what will our family be? Go to the Doyle family and ask for an explanation about this. Matt was a little hesitant. Dad, what we did to Cheryl before, if you don't admit those things, what can the Doyle family do to you? Otis scolded. Matt nodded and prepared his men to go to the Doyle family. Cheryl's head ached. Blood was rushing to her head and her chest felt heavy. She felt like she needed to vomit. She opened her eyes and found that she was being carried upside down. Suddenly, everything rushed back to her. Todd had gotten a call from Emma, and he left the house. Shortly after, the doorbell rang. The maid opened it, but then did not call out. So Cheryl went to see what had happened, and a man in a mask had tried to grab her. And when she resisted, he covered her mouth and nose with a handkerchief, and she lost consciousness. Now she had woken up and was being carried upside down somewhere. She wanted to vomit, but she began to overhear the conversation of the men around her and made sure to pretend that she was still unconscious. Do you guys think that the other group of people went to catch Aiden's wife and child? Did they succeed? One asked. That's a stupid question. If they didn't succeed, how could they have tricked the bodyguard to leaving Cheryl? The other responded. Cheryl realized that they had captured Emma and Wendy first, then likely used Emma's phone to lure Todd away. Then they had captured her. Suddenly, Cheryl's stomach began to churn even more. She wasn't going to be able to hold it down. She began to struggle. Let go of me, she cried. Let go of you. do you think that's possible?" The man sneered and answered. "Let go of me. I'm going to vomit." Cheryl covered her mouth and said. The man quickly put Cheryl down. After Cheryl was put down, she immediately squatted down and started vomiting. When the men saw Cheryl really throw up, they were very disgusted and took 2 steps back. However, their eyes were fixed on Cheryl, afraid that she would take the opportunity to run away. After she finished vomiting, the man who carried Cheryl stretched out his hand to pull her up. "Are you done vomiting?" Cheryl did not say anything and obediently followed them. She looked around and noticed they were near the dock. The man noticed Cheryl looking around and said, "What are you looking at? Let's go." Cheryl lowered her head and followed them. After walking for about 10 minutes, they stopped in front of a cruise ship. The man who carried Cheryl shouted at the cruise ship. Someone walked out of the cruise ship and saw them. Immediately, he shouted at the cruise ship to bring a smaller boat over. The boat emerged from the side of the cruise ship and approached the dock. The 2 men guided Cheryl onto the boat. "Are they back yet?" The man who carried Cheryl asked the man steering the boat. "They came back earlier than you. They've gone to rest," he said. After they arrived on the cruise ship, they brought Cheryl to the cabin. 2 people were guarding outside of the cabin. When they opened the door, they pushed Cheryl inside. She staggered and heard a bang behind her as the door slammed closed. When she got her bearings, she realized Emma and Wendy were lying on the floor of the cabin. She rushed over to them crying their names, but they did not react. She guessed they had been knocked unconscious and hadn't woken up yet. Cheryl shook Emma, and she woke up, glancing at Cheryl in surprise. "Why are you here?" "What's going on?" Emma asked. "They kidnapped us. How did they get you?" Cheryl asked. I took Wendy to the doctor. When I got out of the car, someone covered my mouth from behind and then I lost consciousness," Emma said. "Were you alone with Wendy? Where's Gus?" Cheryl asked. "I don't know." Emma shook her head. She picked up Wendy to make sure that she was okay. So Gus had not been with Emma. Then where was he? Cheryl gestured at Wendy. "Is she okay? I figured I would wake you up and not disturb her," she said. "She seems fine. It's probably better if we do not wake her up," Emma said. Cheryl said, "Don't worry. He will come." If it was just her, he might not save her, Cheryl thought. But Emma and Wendy were here, so he would definitely come. Emma nodded. Her gaze landed on Cheryl's hanging right hand. "Is your hand okay?" Cheryl's hand hurt badly. She even guessed that it was broken again. She shook her head. "It's okay," she said. Emma patted her side. "Sit for a while. I don't know what will happen." Cheryl sat down beside Emma. Gus drove all the way from the Sullivan family and arrived at the dock. As soon as he stopped the car, his phone rang. As he walked to the dock, he took out his phone from his pocket. When he saw that the number on the screen was Aiden's, he immediately pressed the answer button. "How are Emma and Wendy?" "According to our investigation, they should be at the dock. I just arrived. I haven't seen them yet, so I don't know the exact situation," Gus replied as he scanned his surroundings. "I won't be able to arrive for at least 30 minutes, Aiden said. Gus could hear from the background that he was driving quickly. Gus said, "Don't worry. I promise nothing will happen to them." "Thank you," Aiden said. Gus cut off the phone and called the person who had given him the address. The person answered the phone very quickly. "I'm here. Where are you guys?" Gus asked. "Pier number 8, replied the other. Benny had already sent the map to Gus on the way there. Gus immediately looked in the direction of Pier 8. Sure enough, he saw someone there. But he looked away and pretended to not know where he was. "Where is Pier 8? He asked the person on the phone. He followed directions until he approached the pier. There were several men standing on the dock. One was holding a phone to his ear. When he saw Gus, he put the phone down. Then he asked, "Why are you alone? Where's Aiden?" "He can't get here," Gus replied. The man heard Gus's words and said into the earpiece next to his ear, "Only Gus came. Aiden did not come." "Yes, I know." "Okay." Gus immediately understood that there was someone behind this man who was making the maneuvers in the operation.